Today on Sports Science Shorts from the Perception and Action podcast, a reversal of the relative age effect. Can having to prove to everyone that you can play make you a better athlete in the long run? So it's time for a call to action. Hi everyone, this is Rob Gray from ASU and PerceptionAction.com. Welcome to the Perception and Action podcast, where I discuss how psychological research can be applied to improving performance, accelerating skill acquisition, and designing technologies. Now we take you to live action from the Canadian Junior Hockey Championship. We've got a whopper of a game here, folks. March 11th starts around one side of the Tigers' net, leaving the puck for his teammate January 4th, who passes it to January 22nd, who flips it back to March 12th, who shoots point blank at the Tigers' goalie April 27th. April 27th blocks the shot, but it's rebounded by Vancouver's March 6th. He shoots! Medicine Hat defenseman February 9th and February 14th dive to block the shot, while January 10th looks on helplessly. March 6th score! The commentary you just heard was my rendition of an excerpt from Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, which perfectly illustrates an effect I've talked about a few times now on the podcast, the relative age effect, or RAE. In a nutshell, the RAE is that athletes that are relatively older, that is born closer to the cutoff date for leagues, tend to be overrepresented in sports. So in hockey, where the cutoff is January 1st, you get more players born between January and April playing hockey than those born between September and December, as represented by Gladwell's example. This occurs because at a young age, kids that are relatively older tend to be more physically and psychologically mature, and are thus seen as having more potential. Although the physical differences tend to even out as they grow up, it can often be too late, because the athletes born earlier in the year have already been given access to special coaching, opportunities to play on rep teams, etc. Another way that I've heard this put is that relatively older kids have to prove they can't play, while relatively younger kids have to prove they can. For a good review of this topic, I'd recommend the meta-analysis published by Cobley and colleagues in 2009. Link in the show notes. Well, as researchers have begun to dig a little deeper into the RAE, the story seems to be a little more complicated and interesting than the basic relative age effects you might have read about. In particular, as researchers have started to investigate the highest levels of competition, the RAE does not seem to hold up. For example, in 2011, Ford and Williams looked at the effect just for athletes who had won MVP awards in professional sports leagues. They found almost a perfectly equal distribution of birth dates throughout the year. For a concrete example, we now take you live to the 2016 Stanley Cup Championship in ice hockey. What a doozy of a game, folks. The Pittsburgh Penguins are the champions, featuring their starting lineup of June 8th, August 7th, and January 1st, with defensemen September 6th and April 24th, and November 28th stopping the shots between the pipes. If you listen closely, you would have noticed two players born in each third of the calendar year. So relatively older does not necessarily mean you reach the highest levels of sports.
When I went out last night, stayed out pretty late. Now I feel relatively human, and that is relatively great.
Even more interestingly, there is some evidence of a complete reversal of the relative age effect at the highest levels of sport, what some have termed the underdog effect. The first evidence of this came from a study by Ashworth and Hendels in 2007, which found that German soccer players born closer to the end of the year actually earned higher salaries than players born closer to the start of the year. In a study published in the International Review for Sociology of Sport in 2011, Gibbs and colleagues systematically investigated the change in the RAE across different levels of ice hockey. To quantify the RAE, the researchers used the percentage of players born in January, February, or March, which should be, of course, 25% if there's no RAE. As expressed in Outliers and early research in this area, at the lower levels of competition there was a strong RAE effect. with the percentage of players born in the first 3 months of the year ranging from 33 to 56% for the junior hockey teams that were studied. At the next level up, that is players drafted into the first round of the National Hockey League, there was again a fairly strong effect, with the percentage ranging from 33 to 47. Next, if you look at all players in the NHL, not just drafted in the first round, the effects get smaller and close to being non-existent, with a percentage of only 28%. Finally, and most interestingly, if you look at the most elite hockey players, in particular those that played on the NHL All-Star team or represented their country in the Olympics, the RAE completely reverses. In other words, drops below the expected value of 25%. In the Gibbs et al. Study, in 2009-2010, only 13% of players on the All-Star team and 13% of the players on the gold medal winning Canadian Olympic hockey team were born in the first 3 months of the year. A final effect that was observed, which has also been found in soccer, is that players born near the end of the year tend to have a longer career, by almost a year on average, and miss less time due to injuries. Okay, now for the million-dollar question. Why does the relative age effect reverse at the highest levels of sport? This issue was explored in a study published earlier this year in the Journal of Sports Sciences by McCarthy and colleagues. In this study, the researchers first provided even more evidence for a reversal of the RAE by looking at 821 rugby players and 668 cricket players. The distribution of birth dates was examined at 2 distinct points along the talent development pathway. First, at the talent identification stage, when players are first selected into national academies. At this point, there was a strong RAE, with 36 and 40% of rugby and cricket players, respectively, being born in the first 3 months of the year. Comparatively, only 16% were born in October, November, or December for both sports. Next, the researchers looked at how many of the players that were selected to the academy were able to convert their talent and reach its highest levels. What was found? Only 5% of rugby players and 2% of cricket players in the national academies that were born in the first 3 months of the year were able to reach its highest levels. The comparable numbers for the athletes born in the last 3 months of the year were 11% for rugby and 7% for cricket, respectively. So again, a clear reversal of the RAE. McCarthy and colleagues then go on to consider why these effects might be occurring. In particular, they cite research from other domains which shows negative cognitive and psychological consequences of being relatively young. Such individuals often face more adversity and higher levels of challenge from their peers as compared to those that are relatively older. McCarthy and colleagues propose that these early struggles can actually make an athlete more resilient and mentally tougher, which makes them more successful in making it through the academy. So even though athletes that are born earlier in the year have an advantage when their success is in the hands of the scouts, in other words at the talent ID selection stage, they may be at a disadvantage when the scouts are out of the picture and they have to prove themselves making it through the academy. So 3 cheers for the underdog.
There's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
I look forward to seeing more research on the reversal of the RAE in the future. Okay, time to reverse the momentum of this episode and bring it to a close. Coming soon to the Perception in Action podcast, a look at perceptual motor development, from infant to adult athlete. As always, you can contact me via email, robgray@asu.edu, follow me on Twitter @ShakyWeights, and find all the information about the podcast at perceptionaction.com. This is Rob Gray from ASU. Cheers for now.